For my half-sister, John personally sent me, his fiancée, to jail. When I got out, he was there with red eyes, pleading, "Anne, I'm here to take you home." I tilted my head, glancing at the woman I loathed standing behind him. I let out a sarcastic laugh and got into another man's car. Another slap came down hard. It wasn't me. I bit the inside of my cheek, refusing to let out a single sound of pleading. It wasn't me. After countless slaps, Frank was already seeing red. My head buzzed from the beating. That woman called me a thief, and he hit me like one. I glared back at the family of 3 before me, blood slowly seeping from the corner of my mouth. Fiona, no longer fragile in front of others, smiled down at me with a condescending look. Stepmother Cindy, in her fake soft voice, urged, "Anne, apologize quickly. Don't upset your dad. He's not in the best health." I spat out a mouthful of blood. Just then, Frank kicked me in the chest. I was left sprawling on the cold floor, gasping like a wounded animal. On a night when I thought I'd be beaten to death by my own father, John showed up like a savior. I unexpectedly fell into a warm embrace and vaguely heard a familiar voice sigh, "How did you get so thin?" I crooked a painful smile, more like a grimace. "John, you're finally back." John and I had an arranged marriage from birth. Before he left for abroad at 14, I still had a happy family. When he returned at 19, I had become the outcast in my own home. A month after my mom passed away, Frank, eager, brought this mother-daughter duo home. That sister, Fiona, was just 8 months younger than me. The betrayal shattered my world. If it weren't for John's nightly calls, I might have gone down with them. His calm, deep voice soothed my tormented soul. He assured me, saying, "Even if the world gives up on you, I'm by your side." But I never imagined he'd fall in love with my enemy. The person I trusted most delivered the hardest blow. Both Fiona and I attended a private university funded by the Fu family. Fiona was there because her grades were too poor to go elsewhere. As for me, they wouldn't allow me to escape their grip. When John returned, he transferred to our school. His future was set, so it didn't matter where he studied. On the first morning of the new semester, he was at my door right on time. Just as I was about to get in the car, a sweet, sticky voice called out, "John, mind giving me a ride?" I frowned with disgust. John squeezed my fingers and calmly declined, "Not convenient." I glanced back to see Fiona making a pout, pretending to be magnanimous. I just wanted to know John better. Seeing you two so close makes me envious. Unlike me, all alone. But that's okay, go on ahead, don't be late on your first day. She turned and skipped off to school. John stared after her, momentarily dazed. In the car, John hesitantly asked, "She's just a kid, maybe it's unfair to involve her in past grudges." I snapped up, "John. Don't pity her, she's faking it." I knew how kind John was and how sly my sister could be. John frowned slightly, then softened. "I just want you to be happy, to not be stuck in the past." I locked eyes with him. "John, promise me, don't get close to her." He suddenly chuckled, "Messing up my hair, what? Afraid she'll steal me away?" I stayed silent, casting my eyes down. John playfully pinched my cheek. Okay. I'll keep my distance. You little worrywart." I rested my head on his shoulder. "John, I have grown more cautious. Because what little I have is so precious. Please, don't let me down." With his family's influence, John easily joined our major. Fiona made no secret of her delight. Whenever there was a shared class, she'd find a seat near John, annoyingly persistent. Whenever I looked up, there Fiona was, trying to cozy up to John. John always remained distant. Because of me, he was always chivalrous with girls. "John, can you help me with this problem?" "I don't know it either, ask someone else." Fiona kept trying, but John kept refusing. But an inexplicable unease settled in my heart. Henry brought a workbook over, breaking my distraction. We'd been in the same class for 2 years, but rarely interacted. I looked at him, puzzled, and he quietly said, You've been staring for half an hour. Maybe try this method? I felt a bit embarrassed, wondering if he was mocking my fixation on John or genuinely helping. But I appreciated the nudge. I picked up my pen again. Thanks, I was distracted. He nodded subtly, and the conversation ended. I focused back on my work. Entering the classroom in the morning, I spotted the breakfast on John's desk. That food container was unmistakable. John sheepishly rubbed his nose. Who left the wrong breakfast here? I looked calmly at Fiona. John, I made this for you. It's nutritious. I noticed you skip breakfast a lot. That's not good. Try some, okay? She hesitated like a scared rabbit, as if John's refusal would make her cry. John lightly nudged me from behind. I looked away, heading to an empty seat. John cleared his throat. I had breakfast today. You can give it to someone else. Then he quickly followed me, sitting down with his back turned. Fiona's eyes welled up in an instant. During the break, I dragged John to the rooftop. I gave him a warm rice ball. Eat while it's hot. Though it's not nutritious. John lowered his head, squinting slightly at my expression. Then he burst into laughter. Mayan is so cute when she's jealous. My face burned. What nonsense are you talking about? He stretched his arms lazily, seeming nonchalant, but said, she's just an innocent bystander. Can we stop taking out our anger on her and treat her like an ordinary classmate, please? I forced a smile, shadows lingering in my eyes. You can. You're your own person. I can't change your likes or dislikes. But every step you take towards her is a step away from me. You can definitely choose to be against me. The laid-back smile on John's face faded slowly. Never mind, I didn't say anything. Young guys always rebel against interference, but I had to lay down my boundaries for him. I tugged at his sleeve gently. I have to go to City A for a math seminar at University B. It'll help with my grad school chances there. You won't see me for 2 weeks, so don't be mad at me, John. After a while, he sighed, pinching the back of my neck playfully. Of course I'll always be on your side. I'm just mad you don't trust me. Henry is in the same seminar as me. He doesn't talk much, but he's warm-hearted. Even though he knows we're competitors, he still helps me with my questions. In return, I shared my treasured solution manual with him, though it was hard. The expression on his face when he took it was complicated, like he wanted to say something but didn't. In the end, he just awkwardly said thanks. I couldn't figure it out until our instructor pulled out the same manual and smiled at Henry, asking him to share his thoughts on writing it. I felt my face turning all shades of red. I was the fool all along. On the bus back, I jokingly complained, why didn't you tell me you wrote that manual? You made me look so dumb. Henry stammered, his neck turning red from embarrassment. He usually faces everything with ease. It was rare to see him caught off guard. I couldn't help but laugh. He relaxed a bit, then awkwardly turned away. It was kind of cute. The day after the seminar ended, I barely made it to the first class of the morning. Just as I stepped into the classroom, John looked up as if feeling my presence. His smile made me smile back. My eyes wandered over, and I saw Fiona sitting next to him, in what used to be my spot. She looked at me with a half-smile. My heart sank with that familiar nagging unease. Every time she smiles like that, I end up losing something, my dad, my room, my favorite doll. Seeing the hot water bottle on John's desk confirmed my unease. Wait, you don't even like hot water. When did this change? I stopped abruptly, noticing that his blue water bottle and the pink one beside it were a matching pair. It was obvious who had filled the hot water. John seemed a bit panicked by my silence. He pulled me to the hallway corner, gripping my shoulders tightly. And she put it there. I didn't really drink it, just a sip when my stomach hurt. Please don't be mad. I was speechless for a moment. A slight impatience flickered across John's eyes. I raised my brows, asking calmly, why? Why are you having stomach issues? John mumbled, it's probably from drinking too much ice water. I gently pulled his hand off my shoulder, holding it softly. His palm was still warm. Don't drink so much cold stuff, okay? John nodded, dropping his gaze. I handed him a rice ball I had in my pocket. He opened his mouth, looking a bit embarrassed, but took it. Since then, John has stayed away from Fiona, at least in front of me. When I finished using the restroom and washed my hands at the sink, Fiona walked up, turning on the tap slowly. It must be tough for John to be friends with you, she said. He has to watch what he says and does around you. I feel bad for him. I wiped my hands with a paper towel, pausing as I was about to throw it away. I stared at the bin, seeing my rice balls on top. It was like a cold wave splashed on my face, making me shiver. Fiona theatrically covered her mouth. Oops, sorry, my bad. She exaggerated a glance at the bin, acting surprised at the sight of the rice balls. After having my breakfast, how could John eat something so gross? You shouldn't blame him. He didn't want to eat it, but he didn't want to hurt your feelings, so he asked me to deal with it. My hand slipped, and it fell in. Sorry. But her sly smile didn't match her words. I walked out silently, bumping into Henry. Gesturing to the pail in his hand with my chin, I asked, "Are you done with that?" Henry seemed confused. This is dirty water for washing the blackboard. Perfect. I took the pail, marched back into the ladies' room, and dumped it over Fiona's head. She screamed, holding her head. Anne! How dare you! I'll have our dad punish you. I shrugged. You better kill me with one hit, because if not, I'll make you regret ever being born. I picked up the rice balls from the bin and left. Henry stood at the restroom entrance, looking concerned. He probably heard everything. He'll keep his distance from someone as isolated as me. I shoved the empty pail into his hand and left silently. The classroom was empty except for John waiting for me. I returned to my seat, face still damp, and John noticed my expression was off. He rushed over. And, what happened? I placed the rice balls on the desk, wiping off the dirt with a napkin. John's eyes widened. Carefully opening the package, I was relieved they were still clean inside. Remember how you used to love these before studying abroad? Time's passed, and maybe your tastes have changed. And I already had breakfast today, so I gave it away. How did it end up with you? John's voice had a hint of guilt. I wanted to ask him why he would accept Fiona's kindness, knowing how my family treated me. I wanted to ask why he promised to stick by my side and then turned around to sympathize with my enemy. But looking at his cautious demeanor, all the questions bottled up inside me suddenly wouldn't come out. Fiona was right, John looked so tired now, and it felt like I was slowly pushing him away. Suppressing my chaotic emotions, I looked up and smiled. What are you talking about? I bought this for myself and accidentally dropped it on the floor. John's tense expression instantly softened. I took a bite, the cold, hard rice scratching my throat uncomfortably. John frowned. It's all cold, don't eat that. I swallowed hard and mumbled, it's fine, I don't want to waste food. John looked at me with a mix of pity and guilt, then snatched the rice ball and stuffed it in his mouth. I quickly handed him my water bottle and patted his back, thankfully preventing him from choking. You idiot! I exclaimed, frantic. John seemed more serious. He exhaled sharply and looked at me intently. Anne, are you punishing me in your own way? I admit I was wrong. I shouldn't have been so soft-hearted with Fiona. You can yell at me, hit me, but I can't let you hurt yourself. It makes me feel worse. My heart softened as I stepped forward to hug him, resting my ear against his chest. John, I'm really not a good person. If you choose me, you have to stay away from Fiona. I know it's against your principles of being nice to everyone, but I can't tolerate you being friends with her. I'm very possessive. John suddenly tousled my hair and hugged me tighter from behind. Through his shoulder, I noticed Henry standing alone at the door, his eyes deep and unreadable. We both knew something had changed. We were careful not to acknowledge it, trying hard to keep the peace. The more John avoided Fiona, the more she approached him. Even in a crowded library, she'd sit by John's seat, holding her homework pathetically. And he'd take it, soften, and write down the steps to solve the problems. Sometimes, Fiona would strut past me at home, holding an empty breakfast box. I started feeling exhausted. John never officially gave me a title or position. I put all my energy into studying, waiting to get into university for graduate school so I could get away from Fiona and her family. That's when I'd ask John for an answer. When I was trying to let this drama cool down, Fiona disrupted the balance. Right as John and I stepped into the classroom, a voice sneered, "A girl squatting at someone's feet every day, how cheap is that? Does John even notice you?" Fiona already had a poor reputation in class, especially since John was secretly admired by so many girls. I glanced at John, whose face was filled with anger, about to rush inside. I hurriedly grabbed his arm. "Yes. I like John, what's wrong with that?" Fiona shouted. "You all want him, but none of you dare say it." "But I dare. I like John unconditionally." Gone was her usual fragile demeanor, her voice was shaky with false bravado. John's lips tightened into a line, and his lowered lashes quivered slightly. Such fervent love, what guy wouldn't be moved? My heart burned with jealousy and sadness. "I need a bathroom break," John muttered, shaking off my grip and heading in the opposite direction. I didn't chase after him, stepping to the doorway as Fiona turned her head, flashing me a sweet smile. After that informal confession, Fiona abruptly stopped pestering John instead. John became unsettled. Until near the semester's end, the school hosted a sports event. Fiona intercepted us on the road, her face filled with bravery. "John, I'm running the 3,000-meter race today. Can I ask you to cheer for me?" She clasped her hands together, her eyes beaming with hope. John looked away, clearly awkward. "I might not have the time." Fiona's gaze dimmed, almost pleading, "I've never run this long before. If John just looks, I'll have the courage to finish. It won't take much of your time." I had hundreds of reasons to dismiss her but couldn't utter a word seeing John's moved expression. Fiona dashed off like the wind, not giving John a chance to refuse. All morning, John sat in the library, lost in thought. I figured it was time to make a decision. When the announcement for the women's 3K came on the speaker, I got up to use the restroom. When I returned, John's seat was empty. Anticipated as it was, my chest still tightened in painful disappointment. Fiona wasn't an athlete, but she was running the 3,000 meters. I had to admire her, even if it was for John. I slowly made my way to the field, where cheers rang loudly. I lost track of the laps as Fiona's face turned ghostly pale, gasping for breath, her body teetering. John clenched his fists, eyes locked on the track, unaware of my presence behind him. Reaching the finish line, Fiona found John's gaze through the crowd and smiled in triumph. The next second, she collapsed, and John darted to catch her. My hand froze midair. John somberly cradled her, parting onlookers instinctively making way. I stopped John firmly. "Don't." John's handsome features turned to a cold scowl. "Don't be silly, move aside." I steeled my neck and gritted my teeth, afraid my voice would betray my tears. Today, I was demanding a choice, his preference. As long as he's on my side, I'd personally carry my enemy to the infirmary. John had no patience left. He angrily knocked away my hand and walked off carrying Fiona. A chill ran through my heart, a tide of disappointment surged and suffocated me. Disdainful murmurs surrounded me, usually so quiet. Who knew she could be so vicious? Terrifying. I was surrounded, like a criminal being publicly shamed. I tried hard not to cry. Since my mom died, I never cried in front of others. I kept telling myself, it's okay. I'm just back to being alone. Been there, done that. It's all good, Anne. Right when my nails were about to dig into my palms, a warm hand wrapped around mine. Amidst the gasps around, Henry silently pulled me away from the crowd. He led me forward without looking back until I couldn't walk anymore. I grabbed his hand, panting, and stopped in my tracks. Exhausted, I forgot my heartache. I shook our clasped hands. Where are we going? Henry let go like he'd been burned, his clear face flushed with embarrassment. Wherever you want to go, I'll go with you. I sneered, are you pitying me? Henry raised his eyes slightly, those dark pupils reflecting my stubborn self. Do you need my pity? I shook my head self-deprecatingly. I don't need anyone's sympathy. You've seen who I am. If you don't want to be isolated too, stay away. Henry's expression grew intense, staring stubbornly, but I've never known what it means to be sensible. I'm not your John, the righteous dude. I'm selfish and cold. My softness is only for one person. Doesn't matter if she's evil or good, I'm on her side. My heart skipped. The answer I longed for from John, I got from someone else. Is this comfort? I was quiet for a long time. Henry looked more anxious. And, don't you get it? I'm on your side. I always have been. Henry. I quickly averted my gaze. I'm tired. I just want to go home. Disappointment flashed across Henry's face, but he quickly returned to his gentle, warm self. I'll take you home. We walked in silence. It didn't feel awkward. When parting, I whispered, thank you. Henry didn't reply, just waved reassuringly and turned away. I watched him leave, his silhouette blending into the dark until it disappeared. Passing Fiona's room, John stepped out. We were at a loss for words. Anne, John hesitated. I looked back expressionlessly. I thought you'd made yourself clear today. John frowned, confused. And, do you have to be so extreme? Our years of friendship, do you really want me to choose? Fiona can't help who she is. Why must you hold a grudge? John, stop with the noble talk. I want irrational favoritism. I laid down my bottom line from the start. Knowing that, you still chose to go to her. You made the decision that ripped us apart. Anne. Why do you? No interaction means, I raised my voice. You're like a stranger now. No more sharing joy or sadness, no involvement in each other's lives. I won't even spare you a glance. You've exited my life, John. Fear flickered in John's eyes. He reached out to grab my hand. Don't, Anne, I calmly looked at him, stepping back. Fiona appeared behind John, sensing his dilemma. She bit her lip and hugged his waist. John. Please don't leave me. I'll make amends for my parents. Just don't abandon me. Without you, I'd rather die. I thought no one could refuse such a fragile plea, especially kind John. His eyes filled with pain, but he took Fiona's hand under my indifferent gaze. I laughed suddenly, turning to leave at my own pace. John's calls grew faint behind me. Fiona was wrong. I'm not strong at all. That night without John, I cried inconsolably in the dark, feeling the gut-wrenching pain. Just her tears fell before him, mine were for myself alone. Goodbye, John. The next morning, I was walking alone. That winter break, I took 3 part-time jobs. I needed money, and more importantly, to stay busy. I blocked John's number and moved into the cafe where I worked. Life's hardships left no room for mourning. Henry came to the cafe almost every day. He claimed he loved their coffee and often discussed grad school exams at B University with me. Oddly, the owner had no objections and seemed eager to have me sit with Henry. At the end of the break, after serving the last customer, I approached Henry's table, offering a cup of coffee I made. Henry took a sip with anticipation, and his calm face turned to a grimace. Anne. I buried my face in the table, laughing until I cried. In all this time, it was a rare moment of relief and joy. Henry stared at me for a long time. Anne, come with me. Let's go to B University together. Leave this city, okay? His usually stoic face looked somewhat tense and awkward. My smile gradually faded. I'd been lonely for so long, it's been ages since I heard the word we. On a whim, I reached out and pinched his blushing earlobe. All right. During the last semester, I studied like crazy, seeing nothing but test papers day and night. The temptation Henry dangled was too alluring. I started hoping for more. Every time John tried to get close, Henry would pull me away like a protective hen guarding her chicks. I have no clue what Fiona told him, but the guilt in John's eyes slowly turned into ice-cold indifference. He even sneaked into my attic one day when he came supposedly to see Fiona. He grabbed my throat, seething with anger, and, "You betrayed me." I struggled, slapping his hands. His breath reeked of alcohol as he pinned me down on the bed. The difference in strength made me unable to break free from his grip. "John. Let me go." He buried his head into my neck, his breathing heavy. "And, stay away from him. I don't know what I'm capable of otherwise." My scream caught in my throat as his lips moved from my neck down to my collarbone. When his hands slid under my pajamas, I broke down crying, "I hate you. I'll hate you forever, John." He stopped abruptly, his angry red eyes staring at me. "I hate you more, Anne. I hate that I can't leave you. Don't tell me there's no future. After college, we'll leave and get married abroad." I only choked back tears, not daring to argue with a drunken man. To John, my silence seemed like agreement. He smiled with relief and softly kissed the corner of my mouth. Once he closed the door behind him, I clutched my blanket, gasping for air. In that moment, I knew even more firmly, I had to leave. I needed a new life. The bell marking the end of the graduate exams rang. I rushed out of the exam hall in a flash, scanning the crowd desperately. Suddenly, someone seized my hand from behind. Turning around, I met Henry's smiling eyes. Nervously, I squeezed his hand. "Henry, I'm worried." He gently squeezed back, "Don't worry. It'll all turn out fine. You'll get what you want, and so will I." When I got the acceptance notification, I thought my hardships were over. But no. I was told my enrollment was cancelled because I didn't send my records in time. I stood there frozen. No, there must be some mistake. I called my teacher in a panic. He said it was my mother who took the records. Mother? I don't have a mother. My mom's been dead for ages. I screamed into the void, but it was all in vain. The phone crashed to the ground, shattered. Like a ghost, I walked into the master bedroom, a place I hadn't entered since my mom died. The room was now so different. Cindy was sitting at the vanity, applying moisturizer. "Why did you take my records?" She shot me a sidelong glance, disdain twisting her face. "You can't even call someone, and you think you're good enough for a big university?" I asked again, "Why did you take my records?" She hurled a bottle at me. So annoying. "I took them 'cause I can." Think you can just leave with a fancy degree and snag John? Dream on. He's meant for my daughter. You'll stay home and marry who I choose. I decide your life. The bottle dropped, smearing my blood on the floor. Cindy merely snorted. After casually destroying my future, she didn't even bother to look my way. Such cruelty in the world, how chilling it is. I touched the blood on my forehead. It stung. Since I can't step into the light, let's fall into darkness together. When Henry came out, I was waiting quietly outside his gate. At first sight, his cool aloofness melted away into joyful surprise, his eyes sparkling. He hurried over, 3 steps merging into 2. "What brings you here? Did you get your acceptance yet? Why didn't you call me first? I could have picked you up. I missed you, so I came," I interrupted his chatter, smiling. My sudden directness stunned Henry. He stood frozen, then suddenly hugged me tightly. "Anne," Henry murmured, nuzzling my ear, repeating my name like a playful puppy. I patted his back gently, though my heart was in turmoil. "Henry, I'm here to say goodbye. My family's going abroad for the summer. My phone's broken, so I can't contact you for now. We'll meet at B University." "No," Henry shook me. "I'll buy you a phone right now. Not seeing or hearing from you will drive me crazy." My heart felt like it was being pierced with 1,000 blades. I shook my head. You know my family's strict. They won't allow it. We'll meet at B University, okay? Forcing a stern face, good relationships have to stand the test. This time, you have to listen to me. I feared saying more would make me spill everything, but I couldn't. I wanted to leave Henry with the little kindness I had. I hoped he'd stand brilliantly at the top university, with a bright future ahead. As for me, I'll stay in the mire, watching and blessing him from afar, and that's enough. Before leaving, I asked for one last gift. I pulled back slightly and kissed him before he could frown, a taste clean and pure, a memory for my future. After our goodbye, I went straight to the police station. I surrendered. I had killed someone. Pushing Cindy down the stairs wasn't a moment of regret. It was a moment of release. Though I hadn't meant to end her, the hatred was real. Maybe Frank did feel some familial bond. In the end, he provided a family understanding testimony, and I was sentenced to 3 years for manslaughter, a better outcome than I expected. Out of gratitude, I agreed to meet him. But it was only Fiona in the waiting room. Silently, I mocked my naivety again. Fiona glared at me with malice, tears in her eyes. When I turned to leave, her venomous words cut through the air. Such a shame John got you such a light sentence. Once I marry him, I'll teach him a lesson about being such a bad judge of character. My fingers twitched slightly, but my feet kept moving out. Behind me, Fiona was still yelling, Anne. You'll die miserably. You're just a rat in the gutter, you'll never make it out of there. Watch me marry John and live a great life. Murderer. Give me back my mom. My heart suddenly ached, but who could give my mom back to me? I was officially put in the women's prison, refusing any visitors. John came by many times, but I couldn't see the point in meeting him. He only managed to send a message, saying he didn't know it was me when he helped Fiona. I gave a bitter smile. It didn't matter anymore. Young love had long been worn out by one different choice after another. 0936 was my number. Just as I was starting to forget my own name, I was taken to a small room. No partition window, no handcuffs, just a regular room. The man in front of me turned around, his eyes like icy pools, cold and terrifying. My eyes instantly filled with tears. Henry spoke softly, like a feather. I waited for you at B University. Where were you? Henry. He stepped closer. I waited all day and into the night. Where were you? You tricked me, Anne. What do you take me for? My heart clenched tightly. The pain was overwhelming. Just go to school, live your life, forget about me. It's that simple. How can I forget? Show me how. This is too hard for me. Do you think I'd have gone to B University if not for you? I was dreaming about our future while you were planning the breakup. Did you ever ask if I was okay with it? Henry was so close. He whispered against my lips, I'm telling you, I disagree. I want us to be together. You have to marry me. I stepped back sharply. Don't you get it? I'm a criminal. That label will stick with me forever. We're worlds apart now. I'd be a stain on your life, and our kids wouldn't even be able to hold their heads up. Henry let out a cold laugh. So, you've even thought about the kids' future? Don't give me crap about being a good match or not. You're the only one for me. If you insist on being this stubborn, then I'll drop B University. Or if it helps, I could even do some time in jail for you. No. You can't. His sharp words cut deep, my ears ringing, barely able to hear anything else. I clenched my fists tight, trembling all over. Without holding back, Henry pulled me into a hug. I'm sorry, Anne. I was wrong. I shouldn't have talked like that. I was wrong. He held me so tightly I felt like the air was squeezed out of my chest. In that breathless moment, I finally broke down, letting myself scream and cry like a mad person, smashing the stones at my heart one by one. Eventually, exhausted, I closed my eyes, vaguely feeling him picking me up. The scent of pine on him soothed me. Just as I was about to sink into the soft bed, I almost passed out. And we'll get married once you get out. No discussion. After a moment's silence, I nodded. From then on, Henry visited me every month without fail, bringing along lots of professional books. I found out he was an only child, and his family was on a level that both Frank's and John's families couldn't reach. For him, education was just icing on the cake. Ever since Henry nearly got kidnapped as a kid, his family sent him to his grandparents' place, hiding his real identity and keeping things low-key. His background made me even more worried about the gap between us. But Henry told me he was raised to believe that only incompetent men cared about their partner's background. Even without his family, he had the confidence to love whomever he wanted. He peppered kisses on my lips, reassuring me that his parents knew all about me. 3 years later, I walked out of the high walls and barbed wire, breathing the air of freedom, feeling like it was a different era. But there, right ahead, stood a familiar, unwanted face. John, with red eyes, reached out to me, "Anne, I'm here to take you home." I turned my head slightly, looking past him. Fiona's face was calm, but her eyes could not hide the hate and disdain. Their superior attitude was too obvious, probably thinking I should be grateful, reaching out in appreciation for their offer after my release. I scoffed, turning in the other direction. "Anne, where are you going?" John grabbed me. Fiona crossed her arms, smirking, "Seeing that limited edition Bentley got you excited, huh? That's not your car, Anne. Have your eyes gone bad from being in jail too long?" "Fiona." John snapped at her. Fiona pouted, stomping her foot playfully. "John, I'm carrying your child and you're treating me like this for Anne?" John turned to me in panic. "Anne, it's not what it looks like. I can explain." I took a deep breath, barely coping with this ridiculous drama right after getting out. I heard the Bentley's door slam open hard. A noble, indifferent man got out. Henry fixated on John's hand, a dark coldness knitting between his brows. He strode toward me, instinctively wrapping his arm around me. His low voice was chilling and menacing. "Are you two catching up with my fiancé? So, John, you have time for this? I guess that abandoned project is all sorted out now?" "Fiancé? Henry, what are you talking about? Let him go." John was furious, reaching to grab me again. Fiona quickly blocked his hand, eyes wide and sparkling. "Henry, scholar. Remember me? I'm Fiona, your university classmate." "I just don't remember. My brain's not for storing irrelevant people." Henry looked away, disgusted, as if he'd seen something filthy. Fiona stood there, frozen and pale. Having lost all patience, Henry held me tight and walked away. I tried hard not to laugh and looked up at this guy's serious face. He probably thinks I don't get that he's just sucking up to me. As soon as we got in the car, Henry pulled me close, going from a commanding CEO to a big golden retriever in a heartbeat. With a sense of pride, he told me about how he hit John's company hard, keeping them on their toes for nearly a year. He called it his gift to me for regaining my freedom. Looking at his face, all eager for praise, I have to say, it was just too cute. When the car stopped, Henry held my hand and took me to a fancy apartment downtown. In a gentle tone, he asked, "Anne, this is our home. Do you like it?" A wave of warmth rushed through me, filling my chest with emotion. Looking around the warmly decorated place, I couldn't help but touch everything. A home. I finally have a home. Henry wrapped his arms around me from behind and said, "I bought an advertising agency and it's in your name. I know you love it. You can do whatever you want with it, even sell it if you feel like it." I couldn't help but choke up. Happiness was coming too fast and strong. "Henry, you're too good to me, so good that I'm scared it might all just be a dream." Henry lovingly brushed my cheek. "And, from today on, you only need to do 2 things. Be happy and love me. I'll handle everything else. You don't have to be afraid." Lately, it's been like living in a dream. The past and all its scars have started to fade. The company Henry bought for me had a solid setup and a great team, so I took over quickly. "And there's a Miss Fiona downstairs claiming she's your sister. She's making a fuss, saying she has something urgent. I paused with my pen in hand. Fiona. I leaned back in my chair. Let her in. In just a couple of months, Fiona looked like a completely different person. The once arrogant woman now stood before me looking worn out. Her swollen belly took away her slim waist, and her puffy face was full of fatigue. Forcing a smile, she said, "Long time no see. Your company is pretty impressive." I cut her off. I don't see how dragging up family ties would do any good. Hearing, "Sister," from you makes me sick. I know your greedy nature better than anyone. Just get to the point. Fiona clenched her fists, then let them go. When she looked up again, her face was full of sorrow. I beg you, let Henry go easy on John. There's no need to carry on the grudge from the previous generation. I know you're mad I took John, but love isn't something you can force. Do you really want us bankrupt? At least think about your unborn nephew. Her performance was impressive, but too bad I'm not John. I lowered my head back to my documents. So, you wasted 10 minutes of my time to say all this nonsense? What Henry decides to do is up to him. None of you mean enough for me to interfere with. Stay out of my sight from now. Oni glanced up, smiling slyly. After all, I'm a murderer. Fiona stepped back, nearly losing her balance. I waved my hand for security to escort her out. As I left the office, I ran right into John. Standing in the shadows of the trees, he looked as if a strong wind could blow him away. Are you here to convince Henry too? No, John said, shame creeping in. He raised his eyes but then dropped them again. No, I just wanted to see you. And, you've denied my visits all these years. I know you blame me. We grew up together, I thought we'd be together forever. But here we are. I glanced at my watch. If you're just reminiscing, I'm really in a hurry to get home. Home. John lost his words in confusion. So, you're with Henry. You promised to marry me. I messed up once, and you just gave up on us? What if I said I'd give up everything now? Would you come back to me? John's confession was clearly costing him his pride. John, you still don't get it. Henry or no Henry, we were never meant to be. You can't give me what I need, and I don't feel that way about you. Watching the pain cross his face, I felt no satisfaction, just an overwhelming sense of pointlessness. Goodbye, John. I turned and walked away. John, desperate, called after me, do you really love Henry? Is it not just settling, or out of spite, or because of his status? Of course. Of course, I love him. I don't need to explain it to anyone. On my wedding day, I got a message from an unknown number. You were the only one I ever loved. I deleted it without a second thought. He wouldn't cheapen love on my big day. The past, people and grudges, had no place in my life anymore. All my focus was on the future with the man who was like a warm breeze. Henry touched his face, confused. Am I so handsome you can't look away? He asked, making me cry with laughter. On this sunny day, I was ready to promise my forever to the man who'd always loved me most.